Do not start your car. Maid yelled at the Mafia boss. He froze when he found out why. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. It was a chilly evening in the heart of the city, and a sense of tension hung thick in the air. Outside, the night was quiet, the kind of silence that only comes before something big happens. Inside a lavish mansion, a group of wealthy guests gathered, their laughter and chatter filling the expansive dining room. Among them was a woman, Mia, the maid, who stood silently at the edge of the room, her eyes lowered to the polished floor beneath her. She had been working for the prestigious DeLuca family for almost a year, but tonight, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, and there was a nervous energy that she couldn't shake. She had always been the invisible one, the one who silently went about her work, unnoticed, except when someone needed her. But tonight, something was off. As Mia stood, holding a tray with empty wine glasses, she overheard a conversation that made her stomach turn. She had no business listening, but the words cut through her like a knife. She's just a maid. Can't believe she's even in this room, one of the guests sneered, laughing to his companions. Doesn't even belong here, another added, his voice dripping with disdain. Mia's heart sank. She had always been treated as nothing more than a servant. But this felt different. They weren't just insulting her role, they were belittling her as a person. The laughter continued, but Mia stayed silent, forcing a smile as she walked to the far corner of the room. But something inside her snapped. She couldn't stay quiet anymore. She couldn't let them degrade her like this. Taking a deep breath, she turned toward the table where the group was still laughing. Her voice, though shaking, was loud and clear. "Stop," she yelled, her words cutting through the noise. The room fell silent instantly. Mia had never raised her voice like that before. She had never dared to speak out against her employers, let alone their guests. But tonight, something inside her had broken. She stood there, eyes burning with frustration, staring at the men who had humiliated her, her heart racing in her chest. The guests exchanged confused glances, unsure of how to respond to the outburst from the quiet maid who had never spoken up before. One of the men, a tall figure in a sleek black suit, looked up from his glass of wine. His cold, calculating gaze met hers, and for a moment, the tension in the room thickened. This man, Leo DeLuca, the Mafia boss, was known for his ruthless business dealings, his icy demeanor, and his ability to make people disappear with a single word. He had built an empire with power and fear, and yet, in this moment, something in his eyes softened as he looked at Mia. His expression didn't betray any anger, but a flicker of something unexpected passed through his dark eyes. He stood up slowly, his tall frame towering over the group. "Everyone, please excuse us," he said in a calm, yet commanding voice. The guests, still shocked, quickly stood up and began to file out of the room, whispering to each other. Leo walked toward Mia, his footsteps echoing through the vast space. As he reached her, he stopped just a few feet away, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't like being yelled at," he said, his voice low, controlled. Mia swallowed hard, her knees weak from the rush of adrenaline. She had never been this close to him before, and the sheer presence of the man sent a chill down her spine. But despite the fear, something in her stayed strong. "I couldn't stand it anymore," she whispered. "The way they spoke to me." Leo studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as if trying to understand the depth of her emotions. Then, without a word, he motioned for her to follow him. Mia hesitated for a split second before nodding. She had no idea what he was going to do next, but she knew one thing. This moment had changed everything. Mia followed Leo down the long hallway, her thoughts racing. Why had he reacted this way? Why was he even speaking to her? The questions swirled in her mind, but she couldn't answer them. She had just spoken up for herself, something she had never dared to do before, and now, here she was, walking side by side with the Mafia boss himself. As they reached a door at the end of the hall, Leo turned to her and paused. "You don't belong in the shadows, Mia," he said, his voice softer now. "You're more than just a maid." Those words hit Mia like a wave. She had spent so long feeling invisible, forgotten, but here was a man, someone with more power than she could ever imagine, telling her that she mattered. The knot in her stomach loosened, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe it. This night wasn't just a turning point for her. It was the beginning of something far bigger than she could have ever expected. As Mia walked silently behind Leo, she could feel the tension in the air thickening with every step. She had no idea where he was taking her, but she didn't dare ask. After all, she had just yelled at him in front of his guests, and instead of reacting with anger, he had listened. Her heart was still racing, not from fear, but from the strange sense of empowerment she had never felt before. She had finally stood up for herself, and now, here she was, walking beside one of the most dangerous men in New York. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the hallway, and as they reached a grand, dark wooden door at the end, Leo stopped. He turned to face her, his cold eyes still fixed on her, but now with something different in them, something she couldn't quite place. "Go inside," he said, his voice steady. Mia hesitated for a moment, glancing at the door, then back at him. She had never imagined she would find herself in this situation. The very idea of being alone with Leo DeLuca, a man known for his ruthlessness, was terrifying. Yet, there was something about him now that disarmed her, something that made her feel safe. She took a deep breath and stepped through the door. The room she entered was as grand as the rest of the mansion. Velvet curtains hung from the windows, and a large chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting soft, golden light over the room. It felt like she had stepped into a world entirely separate from her own, a world of wealth and power. Leo walked in behind her, closing the door softly. Mia stood in the center of the room, unsure of what to do. Her mind was racing, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point in her life, though she wasn't sure in which direction. Leo, however, seemed calm, his posture relaxed despite the tension that still lingered between them. He motioned toward a chair and gestured for her to sit. "You've got a lot of courage, Mia," he said, his voice low. She didn't know what to say, so she remained silent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was still trying to process everything that had happened. One moment, she had been standing there, humiliated and invisible, and the next, she had stood up and confronted the people who had treated her like dirt. And now, here she was, in this luxurious room with Leo. The silence stretched on for a moment before Leo spoke again. "You could have kept quiet," he said, his eyes studying her closely. "But you didn't." "What?" Mia's throat tightened as she looked up at him. She had never been asked that before, why she had chosen to speak out. The truth was, she didn't know. It had been a surge of emotion, a breaking point after everything she had endured. But she wasn't about to tell him all of that, not yet. Instead, she simply replied, "I couldn't take it anymore. I've spent my whole life keeping my head down. But not this time." Leo's gaze softened, just for a moment, and for the first time, Mia saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected, understanding. "You're not the only one who's been keeping their head down, Mia," he said quietly, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I've had to build this empire by staying in control, by never showing weakness." Mia's curiosity piqued, and she found herself looking at him in a new light. She had always seen Leo as the cold, distant mafia boss, untouchable and ruthless. But now, as he spoke, she realized there was more to him than the facade he wore. She wanted to ask him more, to understand him better, but she held back, not sure if she had the right. "But it's hard," Leo continued, his voice a little quieter now. "Sometimes, it's hard to keep it all together. To never let anyone see the cracks. To always be the boss." Mia didn't know what to say to that, but the words she had been holding back all night suddenly tumbled out. "It must be exhausting," she said softly. "To always be in control, to never let your guard down." Leo's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. He didn't speak for several moments, as if considering her words carefully. When he did speak again, his voice was low, almost introspective. "It is exhausting," he admitted, "but I've never had a choice. Not with the life I lead." There was a heaviness in his words, and Mia felt an odd connection to him in that moment. Two people, both carrying burdens, both trying to survive in worlds that didn't seem to care about their struggles. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't so alone. Leo stepped closer to her, his gaze still intense, but softer now. I need people I can trust, he said quietly. And I think you might be one of those people, Mia. The words hung in the air, and Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea where this conversation was going, but she felt like she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She had spoken her mind, and now Leo seemed to be considering her in a different way. You've got guts, Mia, he said, his voice firm again. And I respect that. But be careful. The world we live in isn't forgiving. People don't always see the truth. They see what they want to see. Mia nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had no illusions about the world she was in. She knew that the Mafia, the DeLuca family, was a dangerous game to play, and she had no idea what she was stepping into. But in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She wasn't going to back down anymore. She wasn't going to be invisible. She wasn't going to be silenced. And as she looked into Leo's eyes, she knew that things were never going to be the same again. As the days passed, Mia found herself caught between two worlds. The world she had always known, the quiet, invisible life of a Maid, and the world she was now being drawn into, a world of power, danger, and intrigue, embodied by Leo DeLuca. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, but she also knew that getting involved with someone like Leo was a dangerous game. She had seen his world from a distance, and now, she was standing right in the middle of it. The mansion had become both her prison and her sanctuary, a place where she was no longer invisible, but still uncertain of her place. One evening, as Mia was finishing her shift, she found herself walking down the grand hallway toward the kitchen when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Leo walking toward her, his tall frame silhouetted against the soft glow of the chandelier. His expression was unreadable, but she could see the weight of the world in his eyes. He stopped in front of her, his gaze steady. Mia, he said, his voice as calm as ever, but there was an intensity beneath it. I need you to understand something. She swallowed hard, not sure what to expect. What is it? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Leo glanced around, ensuring they were alone, before speaking again. There are things about this world you don't know. Things that, if you did, would make you rethink everything. He paused, his eyes locking with hers. But I'm telling you this because I trust you. Mia's heart skipped a beat. Trust? She had never expected those words to come from him. Trust me, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo nodded, his face serious. I don't trust easily, but you've earned it. You've shown me something few people ever do. Guts. You stood up to those men at the dinner, and for that, I owe you. Mia felt a strange sense of pride swell inside her. She had never imagined that her moment of defiance would lead to this. But despite the warmth of his words, a part of her remained cautious. I'm just a maid, she said softly, looking down at the floor. I don't know why you're trusting me, Leo. I don't belong in your world. Leo's expression softened, and for a moment, she saw the vulnerability beneath the Mafia boss persona. You may not think you belong, but you do, he said, his voice low and sincere. You're not just a maid, Mia. You're someone who matters. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so long feeling like she was invisible, like she didn't matter. But here was Leo, the man who ran an empire, telling her the opposite. It was almost too much to take in. Leo stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I need you to trust me too, he continued, his voice firm. I can protect you, but you have to be willing to trust me. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Trust him? She had barely known him a few weeks, and yet, there was something about the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that made her feel like she could. But could she really trust him? The man who had built an empire on fear and power? She hesitated, her mind racing. I don't know if I can, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know if I can trust anyone, let alone someone like you. Leo didn't seem offended by her hesitation. Instead, he nodded as if he understood. I get it, he said quietly. But think about it, Mia. What do you have to lose? Mia stood there, her thoughts swirling in a whirlwind of emotions. She didn't know what to think anymore. Part of her wanted to walk away, to leave this dangerous world behind. But another part of her, something deep inside, wanted to stay. She had never felt so alive, so seen, in her entire life. For the first time, someone was looking at her as more than just a servant. She was more than that, wasn't she? I don't know what this means, Mia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'll try. I'll try to trust you. Leo's eyes softened, and he reached out, his hand brushing hers. "That's all I ask," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I'll take care of you, Mia, but you have to let me." As his hand lingered near hers, Mia felt a spark of something unfamiliar. It wasn't just fear or uncertainty, but something else. Something that made her heart race in a way it never had before. Leo DeLuca was a man she should stay away from. But in that moment, she couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was the one who could change her life. Forever. Leo stepped back, his expression hardening once more, as if the moment had passed. "You're still new to this, Mia," he said, his voice now businesslike. "But you're learning, and that's what I need. Someone who learns, who adapts. The world I live in is dangerous, and you're going to have to be ready for it." Mia nodded, trying to steady her nerves. "I'm ready," she said, though her heart was still racing. Leo studied her for a moment before giving a single nod of approval. "Good. Now get some rest. Tomorrow, things are going to change." As he turned to leave, Mia stayed where she was, her mind still processing everything that had just happened. She had taken the first step into a world she had only ever seen from the outside, and now, there was no turning back. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life was never going to be the same. The next few days were a whirlwind for Mia. What had started as a quiet life of serving the DeLuca family had suddenly turned into something she could barely comprehend. Leo's words had stayed with her, echoing in her mind. "The world I live in is dangerous, and you're going to have to be ready for it." She had agreed to trust him, but what did that really mean? What kind of world had she stepped into, and what was expected of her now? Every corner of the mansion, every interaction with the staff, felt like it was filled with new layers of tension and secrecy. She had started noticing the quiet glances exchanged between the bodyguards, the whispers among the house staff, and even the subtle way Leo observed her when she was doing the simplest tasks. It was as if the weight of the Mafia world had settled onto her shoulders, even though she had only just begun to understand it. One evening, as Mia was walking back to her quarters after dinner, she heard Leo's voice coming from one of the hallways. "Mia," he called out to her, his tone firm but not unkind. She turned toward him, feeling her heart race as she approached. "Yes, Leo?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though her hands were trembling. Leo looked at her with an unreadable expression. "There's something you need to understand about the DeLuca family," he said, stepping closer. "We don't just run a business. We run a legacy." Mia's stomach tightened at the mention of the word legacy. She had heard it whispered by others, but hearing it directly from Leo made the weight of it more real. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo nodded slowly. "No one is ever ready. But that's what makes us strong. We learn as we go." He paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I've seen something in you, Mia. Something rare. That's why I'm trusting you with more responsibility." Mia looked up at him, confused. "More responsibility?" she repeated. Leo's gaze softened, and he took a step closer. "You're going to be helping me with something important. It's time for you to be a part of this." Mia felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't sure if she was ready to be a part of whatever this was, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Leo, toward the dangerous world he inhabited. She nodded, though she felt unsure. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. Leo gave her a small smile. "First, you need to understand something," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's more to me than just the Mafia boss. There's a reason I do what I do. I don't just protect myself. I protect the people I care about." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors, whispers about Leo's past, about the people he had lost, but she had never heard him speak of it like this. It made him seem human, vulnerable even. "I'll do my best," Mia said, her voice firming as she tried to push aside the unease growing inside her. Leo nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer. "I know you will. You're stronger than you think." With that, Leo turned and walked down the hallway, leaving Mia standing there, her mind racing with 100 questions she didn't have answers to. The next few days were a blur. Mia found herself more involved in the family's affairs than she ever could have imagined. Leo had begun giving her small tasks, things that seemed simple at first, but quickly grew more complicated. She found herself handling sensitive documents, speaking with people she had never imagined she would interact with, and even accompanying Leo to meetings where the tension in the room was so thick, she could barely breathe. Yet, with every new task, every new responsibility, Mia felt a strange sense of pride. She was no longer just a maid. She was becoming something more. But as she became more involved, she also began to see the darker side of the DeLuca family. She saw the fear in the eyes of the people who worked for Leo, the way they moved around him with careful steps, as if walking on eggshells. She saw the loyalty and the fear that went hand in hand, and she couldn't help but wonder how much of that fear was directed at her. She had become a part of Leo's world, but what did that mean for her future? Was she just another piece in his game, or was there more to it than that? One evening, as Mia was sitting alone in her room, reflecting on everything that had happened, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Leo standing there, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. Mia's heart skipped a beat. "About what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Leo stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "There are things happening," he said, his voice tense. "Things that I can't ignore anymore." Mia felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Leo's gaze hardened. "I'm not just a boss, Mia. I'm a target, and I need someone I can trust to have my back." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "You want me to help you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo nodded, his gaze unwavering. "You're the only one I trust." Mia didn't know what to say. She had no idea what she was getting into, but one thing was clear. Leo was pulling her deeper into his world, and there was no turning back. The next morning, Mia woke up to the sound of a distant rumble of thunder. It was early, far earlier than she was used to, but there was no time to rest. She had learned quickly that the DeLuca family didn't operate on a standard schedule. Her role had shifted once again. After Leo had entrusted her with more responsibilities, it seemed as if every day brought new challenges, new tasks, and new risks. Mia had no choice but to adapt, to step further into the world Leo inhabited. As she dressed and prepared herself for the day, she thought back to the conversation she had had with him the night before. He had asked her to help him, to have his back, to step up in ways she had never imagined. She had agreed, of course. But now that the reality of what that meant was setting in, Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was part of something far bigger, something far darker. Her heart raced as she walked toward the main hall of the mansion, her thoughts tangled in the complexity of what she was about to face. As she reached the hallway, she spotted Leo standing by the grand staircase, speaking to one of his bodyguards. His presence was commanding, as always, but there was something different in his demeanor today. He looked uneasy. Mia paused for a moment, unsure if she should approach, but Leo caught sight of her and motioned for her to come over. "Mia," he said, his voice low but steady. "There's a situation we need to handle. It's going to get messy." The words hit Mia like a punch to the gut. Messy? She had seen the chaos that followed Leo's world, but she had never been this close to it. "What kind of situation?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm, though her nerves were starting to get the better of her. Leo's expression hardened. "One of our allies is trying to make a move on our territory. I need you to stay sharp. I'm going to need you at the meeting today." Mia's heart skipped a beat. A meeting? She had been in Leo's world long enough to know that his meetings were never ordinary. They were tense, filled with danger, and often ended in violence. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Mia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo's gaze softened for a moment, but then he looked at her with the same intensity he always carried. "You are. You wouldn't be here if you weren't ready. But you need to trust me. This is more than just business. This is personal." Mia's mind raced as she tried to process what he was saying. She had seen how much Leo had invested in the people around him. But this felt like something deeper. She nodded, swallowing hard. "I trust you." Leo's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he turned toward the door. "Good. Let's go," he said. Mia followed him, her steps hesitant but determined. As they left the mansion, the rain had started falling harder, the sky dark and heavy. It matched the tension in the air. They drove in silence, the sound of the rain tapping against the windows as the car sped through the city streets. Mia sat in the back, her thoughts swirling, wondering what kind of meeting she was about to walk into. As they arrived at a discreet, upscale building on the outskirts of town. Mia's nerves tightened. Leo led the way, his stride confident, as always. They entered through the back, avoiding the prying eyes of the public. Inside, the room was dark, lit only by a few low lamps. Several men were already gathered around a large table, their eyes shifting as Leo entered. Mia stayed in the back, trying to remain as invisible as possible, but Leo motioned for her to join him. As she stepped forward, she could feel the eyes of the room on her. The men were silent, their gazes cold, but Leo stood tall, unbothered. "Mia is going to be with us today," Leo said, his voice calm but firm. "She's here to make sure we stay on track." The men exchanged glances, some wary, others skeptical. But none of them dared to question Leo. Mia felt a strange sense of pride swell in her chest. She wasn't just here as a servant. She was part of this. Leo's world. His empire. "We need to make this clear," Leo continued, his gaze sharp as he looked around the table. "There's no room for mistakes. Whoever thinks they can take what's ours is gravely mistaken." The meeting unfolded in a tense silence, with Leo outlining the steps they would take to protect their territory. Mia sat in the background, absorbing every word. She was learning more in one meeting than she had in months. She could see the power Leo commanded, the respect and fear he inspired in the room. At one point, a man at the table spoke up, questioning Leo's plan. Before he could finish his sentence, Leo raised his hand, cutting him off. "Your opinion is noted," Leo said coldly. "But we don't have time for second-guessing. Do as you're told." The man nodded quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment. The power dynamics in the room were clear. Leo was in charge, and no one dared challenge him. As the meeting concluded, Leo turned to Mia. "You did well today," he said quietly, his voice surprisingly warm. Mia smiled, though she was still processing everything. She had just witnessed a side of Leo she hadn't fully understood before, the cold, calculated leader. But there was something else too. A leader who protected what was his, and who trusted the people around him. As they left the building, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. She had entered Leo's world, but now she was part of it. And there was no going back. The days that followed the meeting were filled with a new kind of tension for Mia. She was no longer just a maid in the DeLuca mansion. She was becoming someone who had a role, a purpose, even if she still wasn't sure what that meant. Leo had kept his word. He trusted her, but with that trust came more responsibility. It was one thing to be trusted with small tasks, like running errands or managing guests. It was another to be involved in the kinds of meetings that shaped the fate of an entire empire. Mia wasn't sure she was ready for everything that came with that, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't turning back. She had made a choice when she stood up to Leo at the dinner, and now, that choice was becoming real. One evening, as she was finishing up her shift, Leo called for her. She walked into his study, where he sat behind a large, mahogany desk, looking over some documents. His usual cold demeanor was softened slightly, but there was still an unmistakable air of power about him. "Mia," he said, looking up from the papers. "I need your help with something more delicate today." Mia felt her stomach tighten. She had seen Leo in his meetings, handling business with ease, but now she was going to be directly involved. "What do you need?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Leo stood, walked over to a small, ornate safe in the corner of the room, and opened it with a key. Inside was a folder, thick with papers. He took it out and handed it to Mia. "This is important," he said. "Inside are details about a new business deal. It's crucial that you keep this confidential." Mia nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility. She had always been careful with secrets, but this felt different. She wasn't just holding on to something for Leo. She was now part of the system that kept things running smoothly. As she took the folder from him, she noticed his eyes were studying her carefully. "Mia, I trust you," Leo said. His voice was quieter now, more personal. "But trust is earned, and I need to know that you can handle this." Mia swallowed hard. The gravity of the situation was finally sinking in. "I can handle it," she said, her voice firm. Leo nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. "Good," he said. "Because soon, things are going to change. People are going to start making moves. Some will play dirty, and I need to be sure that you can stand by me, no matter what." His words hung in the air like a promise, or perhaps a warning. Mia didn't know which, but it didn't matter. She was in this now, and she would have to keep her wits about her. What happens next? She asked. Leo turned away, walking toward the window. He looked out at the city skyline, the darkening sky reflecting the uncertainty that loomed over them. Tomorrow, we move forward, he said. But we're not just making deals. We're defending what's ours. And if anyone crosses us, they'll regret it. Mia felt a chill run down her spine at the coldness in his voice. It wasn't just business for Leo, it was personal. You're not just a maid anymore, Mia, Leo continued, his voice low. You're part of this family now. And the DeLuca family does not back down. Ever. The weight of his words pressed down on her, but at the same time, there was something strangely comforting about them. For the first time since she had stepped into this world, Mia felt like she truly belonged. But that sense of belonging came with a price. She wasn't sure she was ready for all that came with it, but there was no going back. The next morning, Mia woke up earlier than usual, the weight of the folder from Leo heavy in her bag. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew it would change everything. As she entered the kitchen, she noticed the staff moving with a sense of urgency, whispers passing between them. The usual quiet chatter was replaced with hushed voices, and Mia could feel the tension in the air. She made her way to Leo's office, where he was already waiting, standing by the window, watching the city. He turned as she entered. Mia, he said, his tone sharp. It's time. He handed her a new set of papers. This time, it wasn't just a business deal. This was something more serious. She could feel the weight of it before she even read the words. You're going to deliver this, Leo said, his gaze intense. And you're going to do it alone. Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. Alone? She repeated. Yes, Leo said. There are things you need to learn. And sometimes, you have to take risks to prove that you're ready for what comes next. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've got this, Mia. Mia didn't know if she believed him, but she knew there was no other choice. She took the papers from him, her fingers trembling slightly. I'll do it, she said, trying to steady her nerves. Leo smiled, though it was a small, almost imperceptible smile. I know you will, he said. As Mia left the office, the weight of the task ahead of her sank in. She had taken the first step into Leo's world, but now, she was being asked to prove herself, to take on something far bigger than she had imagined. She wasn't just part of the DeLuca family anymore. She was being trusted with their future, and that was a responsibility she couldn't take lightly. As she stepped into the car, the rain had started to pour down, the storm mirroring the uncertainty in her heart. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was for certain. Her life would never be the same. The rain had been falling heavily for hours as Mia sat in the back of the car, her thoughts swirling with the weight of the task ahead of her. The papers Leo had given her felt like a lead weight in her lap, a reminder that she wasn't just a maid anymore. She was part of something far bigger, something dangerous, and something that was now hers to protect. The car glided through the slick streets of the city, the headlights cutting through the downpour as the storm raged outside. Mia had never felt so nervous in her life. She had been told to deliver the papers to a meeting that could change everything for Leo's empire. He had made it clear that she couldn't fail, that she had to prove herself in ways she hadn't anticipated. As they approached the destination, Mia's heart started to race. She had no idea what to expect, but one thing was clear. She was about to be involved in something far darker than she had ever imagined. The car pulled up in front of a sleek, modern building, its glass exterior reflecting the dim city lights. The area was quiet, the streets deserted in the heavy rain. Mia stepped out of the car, her coat pulled tightly around her, trying to shield herself from the rain as she walked up to the entrance. As she reached the door, a man in a black suit opened it for her, his expression unreadable. He led her inside, and the moment she stepped through the door, Mia felt a shift in the air. The room was dimly lit, with shadows dancing along the walls, and the smell of expensive cigars hung in the air. Several men were sitting around a large table, their eyes turning toward her as she entered. Mia recognized some of them from Leo's meetings, men who were a part of his inner circle, and she knew that whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be simple. She could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating, as the men studied her with cold eyes. They weren't used to seeing a woman in their meetings, let alone one who wasn't a part of their world. You're the one delivering the papers? One of the men asked, his voice low and gravelly. Mia nodded, holding the folder tightly in her hands. Yes, she said, trying to steady her voice, though her heart was pounding in her chest. The man studied her for a moment before nodding. All right, give it to me, he said, extending his hand. Mia hesitated for a moment, her fingers gripping the folder even tighter. She wasn't sure why she was nervous, but something about this man's presence made her uneasy. She stepped forward and handed him the folder. He opened it quickly, his eyes scanning the contents. As he did, the room fell silent, and Mia could feel every set of eyes on her. She tried to remain calm, but her nerves were getting the best of her. She had no idea what was in the papers, but the weight of the moment was suffocating. The man closed the folder and set it down on the table, his gaze still fixed on Mia. You've done your part, he said, his voice cold. Now get out. Mia nodded, turning to leave, but as she did, she heard a voice from across the room. Hold on. The voice said, sharp and commanding. Mia turned back to see Leo standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the man who had just spoken. You didn't think I would let her leave just like that, did you? Leo's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. The room seemed to hold its breath as the man who had taken the papers stood up, his face flushed with embarrassment. He started, but Leo cut him off with a raised hand. No, Leo said, his tone firm. She stays. Mia felt a sense of relief wash over her as Leo stepped into the room. He was here. She was safe. But as she looked at him, she saw the same intensity in his eyes that she had seen when they first met, the same determination, the same power. And in that moment, Mia realized that this was the man she had chosen to stand by, the man who had entrusted her with everything. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Leo said, his voice low and dangerous as he moved toward the man. You think you can intimidate her? Think again. The tension in the room was thick, and Mia could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen Leo in action before, but never like this. He was calm, composed, but there was a fury beneath the surface that she had never fully understood until now. She's with me, Leo continued, his voice steady. And anyone who threatens her is going to answer to me. The man nodded quickly, backing away from Leo's gaze. The rest of the men in the room remained silent, their eyes shifting uneasily as Leo turned to Mia. You did well, he said, his voice softer now, though still filled with authority. Mia swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. Thank you, she whispered. Leo's gaze softened for a moment, but then he turned back to the group. This meeting is over, he said, his voice final. Everyone out. As the men filed out of the room, Mia stood there, still in shock from what had just happened. Leo had protected her, defended her, and in doing so, had proven just how much she meant to him. She had taken the first step into his world, but now, she had crossed a line. There was no going back. She wasn't just part of Leo's empire. She was a force to be reckoned with, and Leo had made sure of that. As they left the building, the storm had finally started to subside, and the sky above them was clearing. For the first time in a long while, Mia felt like she could breathe again. She had made it through the night. She had proven her loyalty, and Leo had shown her just how much he trusted her. But deep down, Mia knew that this was just the beginning. The world she had stepped into was dangerous, and she was only beginning to understand how much power it held. The following days felt like a blur to Mia. The events of the last meeting had shifted something deep within her. She had entered a room full of dangerous men, delivered sensitive information, and watched Leo assert his dominance with a calm that terrified her and, strangely, made her feel safe. But as the rain continued to fall outside, the weight of what she had just been a part of began to sink in. She had crossed a line that once crossed could never be undone. Leo had promised her protection, but the stakes were higher now. She had proven herself, but she had also become deeply entangled in his world. Mia could feel the difference in the way the other staff treated her now. They no longer saw her just as the quiet maid who cleaned the mansion's vast halls. There was a new respect in their eyes, but also a kind of wariness. She was no longer invisible, and that reality brought with it a strange sense of unease. Leo kept her close in the following days, not allowing her to slip back into the shadows. There was always something to do, always someone to meet, always a decision to be made. He had entrusted her with more than just errands now. He had given her responsibility, the kind that demanded focus and secrecy. One evening, After a long day of meetings and tense exchanges, Leo invited her into his private office. It wasn't unusual for him to do so, but tonight, the air between them felt different, heavier somehow. Mia stepped into the room, and Leo looked up from the papers spread across his desk. His face, usually unreadable, seemed more human in the dim light. "Mia," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I need you to understand something." Mia froze, her heart pounding. She had been around long enough to recognize the weight of his words before they were spoken. She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady, but with an underlying hint of curiosity. Leo stood up slowly, walking toward the window and staring out at the city lights. "This life, it's not easy. People will try to take what we have. Some will try to tear us down." Mia felt a chill run down her spine as she watched him. The truth of what he was saying settled deep in her chest. "I've made enemies, Mia. Powerful ones. And the only way to survive in this world is to stay one step ahead." He paused, turning back to face her. His eyes, always so cold and calculating, held something different now, something almost vulnerable. "I don't trust many people," he continued, "but I trust you." Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard him say those words before, and hearing them now made her heart race. Trust. It was a word that carried so much weight, and the fact that he was giving it to her was both overwhelming and terrifying. "You're more than just a part of this family, Mia," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "You're someone I need. Someone I rely on." The silence that followed felt heavy, as if every word he spoke was a promise, and every moment of their conversation was a step towards something neither of them could turn back from. Mia didn't know how to respond. She had never been good at accepting compliments, especially not from someone like Leo. "I just do what you ask," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo shook his head slightly, a small but noticeable smile crossing his face. "It's not just about following orders, Mia," he said. "It's about loyalty. It's about trust. And you've shown me that you have both." Mia stood there, absorbing his words. It was becoming clear that she wasn't just a part of Leo's world anymore. She was intertwined with it. And as the days passed, she realized how much that would change her. Leo was no longer just a mafia boss to her. He was someone she could no longer ignore. She had a part to play in his world now, and that meant she would have to walk a fine line. But as much as the pressure was mounting, Mia also felt a strange sense of pride. She was in this now, whether she liked it or not. That night, as Mia returned to her quarters, she thought about what Leo had said. About loyalty. About trust. The words lingered in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had already been decided for her. The storm outside had subsided, but inside, Mia could feel the storm brewing in her own heart. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first stepped into Leo's world. She had changed, and there was no going back. The next morning, Mia was summoned again, this time to attend a meeting with Leo and his closest associates. As she entered the room, the tension was palpable. There were no pleasantries, no small talk, just business. The stakes were higher now. Everything felt more urgent, and Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Leo glanced at her briefly, and without missing a beat, he continued with the meeting. Mia knew her role now. She was no longer just the maid. She was an active participant in the decisions that shaped their world. And for better or for worse, she was learning what it meant to be part of something that was both incredibly dangerous and incredibly powerful. As the meeting continued, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was coming. She had proven her loyalty, but the true question was whether she could survive in a world where trust was both a weapon and a risk. With each passing day, Mia was forced to confront the reality that she was no longer just an observer. She was in the game now. And in Leo's world, the stakes were high. Too high for anyone to simply walk away. The days that followed felt like a blur to Mia, the weight of her new responsibilities pressing down on her with every step. Leo had trusted her with tasks far beyond anything she could have imagined when she first arrived at the DeLuca mansion. Her role had shifted from the quiet maid who moved unnoticed through the hallways to someone deeply involved in the inner workings of Leo's world. She was no longer just an observer. She was a participant, a trusted ally in the complex game of power and loyalty. Yet, despite the change, a sense of unease lingered, especially now that she knew just how dangerous the world she had stepped into truly was. Leo had made it clear that there were forces at play, enemies who would stop at nothing to tear his empire apart. And now, she was a part of it all, whether she was ready or not. One afternoon, Mia was summoned to Leo's office. She had been working in the background for the past few days, handling smaller tasks and observing the ongoing operations. But today felt different. There was an intensity in the air, a sense of urgency that Mia couldn't shake. As she stepped into the office, she found Leo standing by the window, staring out at the city below. The room was quiet, the usual hum of activity in the mansion replaced by a stillness that seemed almost oppressive. Leo turned to face her as she entered, his gaze sharp, his posture rigid. "Mia," he began, his voice low and serious. "We've reached a turning point." Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to mask the tension in her voice. Leo's eyes locked onto hers, his gaze unwavering. "I've been running this business for years," he said, taking a step toward her. "But it's never been easy. Now, the people who've been waiting for a chance to take us down are making their move. I need you to be ready. This is the moment we've been preparing for." Mia's heart raced. She had seen the ruthless side of Leo, but hearing him speak like this, with such certainty and purpose, made everything feel more real. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Leo studied her for a long moment before answering. "I need you to stay close. Watch everything. People are going to try to get to me, and they'll try to use anyone they can to get to us. I need to know you're ready to do whatever it takes." Mia swallowed hard, the gravity of his words sinking in. She had always been told that the Mafia world was one of loyalty and betrayal, but hearing it from Leo himself made it clear just how dangerous things were about to get. "I understand," she said, her voice firm. Leo nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. "Good. I've put a lot of trust in you, Mia. Don't make me regret it." As he spoke, there was a shift in his demeanor, something more personal behind the cold exterior. It was a brief glimpse of the man behind the Mafia boss, and Mia couldn't help but wonder if there was more to him than she had realized. After all, she had been thrust into this world with little more than a promise of protection and a desire to prove herself. But now, as she stood in Leo's office, she knew there was no turning back. Leo's empire was hers to protect as much as it was his, and the weight of that responsibility felt heavier with every passing second. The room fell silent again, and Mia could feel the tension building between them. Leo was the most powerful man she had ever known, but she had seen the cracks in his armor. She had seen the vulnerability in his eyes, and that made her wonder, could she trust him completely? Could she truly become a part of his world without losing herself in the process? As if reading her thoughts, Leo spoke again, this time with a softer tone. "You're not just a pawn, Mia. I've seen what you're capable of. But this world, it's not like anything you've ever known." Mia nodded, trying to suppress the nervous energy building inside her. "I know," she said quietly, "but I'm ready to face whatever comes next." Leo's gaze softened, and for a moment, Mia saw something unexpected, an approval, even a flicker of respect. "Good," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "That's exactly what I need." As the minutes passed, the weight of the conversation began to settle in, and Mia realized that she wasn't just involved in this world. She was becoming a part of it. Leo had made it clear that she was more than just someone who served in the background. She had earned his trust, and now, she would have to prove herself worthy of it. The next few days were a blur of preparations. Mia was given new tasks, more responsibilities, and each one made her feel like she was one step closer to understanding Leo's world. The meetings grew more intense, the stakes higher, and the tension in the air was almost suffocating. But Mia didn't shy away. She faced each challenge head-on, determined to prove that she could handle whatever came her way. One evening, Leo called her into his office once again. She walked in, her heart pounding with anticipation. This time, Leo didn't speak right away. Instead, he gestured for her to sit across from him at the desk. "Mia," he said, his voice grave, "things are going to get dangerous. We've been pushing back against our enemies, but now, it's coming to a head. I need you to be ready to act, no matter what." Mia nodded, her mind racing. She had no idea what the next few days would bring, but she knew that she was no longer just a bystander. She was a part of Leo's empire, and if it fell, she would fall with it. Leo looked at her one last time, his expression hardening. "This is the moment," he said. "Don't let me down." Mia stood up, feeling the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming next, but she had no choice but to face it. She had crossed the line. There was no going back. The tension in the mansion was palpable. Mia could feel it in every room, in every glance exchanged. Among the staff, in the way Leo's footsteps echoed through the halls. Things had escalated in ways she couldn't have anticipated. The plan was in motion, and she was right in the middle of it. No longer just an observer, but a key player in the high-stakes world Leo navigated so effortlessly. He had entrusted her with responsibilities that were more than she ever imagined, and she was determined to prove she was capable of handling them. But as the days passed, the stakes continued to rise, and Mia began to understand the weight of the promises she had made to Leo. One evening, as the shadows of the city stretched long into the night, Leo summoned her to his office. It was the usual call, the one she had come to expect whenever something important was happening. But this time, there was an edge to his voice, something colder, sharper. When Mia entered, she could see it immediately. Leo wasn't sitting at his desk, as he usually did. Instead, he was standing by the window, looking out at the rain that had begun to fall again, the light from the city casting a faint glow across his features. He didn't turn to look at her as she walked in. "Mia," he began, his voice low and measured. "We've got a problem. It's time to deal with it." Mia's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of problem?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of the unease she felt. Leo turned to face her, his gaze intense, his expression hard. "One of our closest allies is making moves behind our back. I need you to act fast. You're going to be the one to deliver the message." Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had always known that loyalty in this world was fleeting, but to hear that someone so close to Leo was betraying him struck her to her core. "Deliver the message," she repeated, trying to process what he was asking. "What do you mean?" Leo stepped closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. "We don't tolerate betrayal, Mia. Not in this family. I need you to go to the meeting tonight, look them in the eye, and make sure they know there's no way out." Mia's pulse quickened as the gravity of the situation sank in. She wasn't just being asked to deliver a message. She was being asked to confront someone who had crossed Leo. And in Leo's world, betrayal wasn't just a crime. It was a death sentence. "Are you sure I can handle this?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo's gaze softened for a moment, as if considering her words. Then he nodded slowly. "I've trusted you with more than anyone else. You've proven yourself, Mia. You're ready for this." His words, though reassuring, only added to the weight of the task ahead. Leo had always seen something in her, but now she realized just how far he had taken that trust. She wasn't just part of his world. She was now a part of the family's future, and that meant she had to be prepared to make decisions that would haunt her. Mia wasn't sure she was ready, but she had no choice. She nodded, her jaw set. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the anxiety clawing at her insides. Leo gave a small nod of approval. "I knew I could count on you." He motioned for her to follow him, and together, they left the office. As they made their way through the mansion's darkened halls, Mia couldn't help but feel a strange sense of finality. She was about to cross a line, one she couldn't uncross. They reached the car in silence, the driver waiting for them outside. The rain had started to pour more heavily now, the sound of it tapping against the windows like the ticking of a clock. Mia stared out the window, trying to calm her nerves. The weight of the task ahead of her seemed to press down on her chest with every passing second. As the car pulled up to a nondescript building on the outskirts of town, Mia's heart raced. She could see the shadows of men standing by the door, waiting for them. This was it. No turning back. Leo stepped out first, his presence commanding the room even before he entered. Mia followed, trying to steel herself for whatever was about to unfold. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. The men in the room barely acknowledged them as they entered, their eyes flicking toward Leo before looking away. Mia's mind raced. She had seen this world before. The way people moved when power was in the room. The way even the strongest men could be reduced to nothing in a single moment. Leo walked to the center of the room, his gaze hard as stone. "You all know why we're here," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "Someone has betrayed us. Someone who thought they could play us for fools. The men shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting around, but no one spoke. Mia stayed in the back, her heart thudding in her chest. She had never been this close to something so dangerous, so raw. And yet, she couldn't look away. This was the world Leo had created. And now, it was her world too. Leo turned to one of the men in the room, his eyes narrowing. "You're going to fix this. Now." The man gulped, his face pale. He began, but Leo silenced him with a single glance. "We're done talking. You know what happens next." The man nodded quickly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Mia could feel the power in the room shift. This was the Mafia. This was Leo's world. She had seen it from the outside before, but now, she was in the center of it all, and there was no going back. As they left the building, Mia felt a strange sense of pride mixed with dread. She had done it. She had faced the danger, delivered the message, and seen the consequences of betrayal in the eyes of the men who had been caught in the web of Leo's empire. But as they drove away, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just a part of Leo's world. She was part of something much bigger now, and that meant she had to be ready for whatever came next. The days after the meeting felt like they moved in slow motion. Mia had done what Leo had asked, delivering the message, standing by his side, and witnessing firsthand the harsh realities of the world they inhabited. She had felt the coldness in the room, the tension in the air as Leo asserted his power. It had shaken her to the core, but it also solidified something in her heart. She was no longer just a part of Leo's world. She was a participant in it, an active role that came with immense responsibility. Leo had told her that things would get more dangerous. She had no idea how right he was. The weeks following the meeting felt like a game of chess, each move calculated, every decision carrying significant weight. The stakes had been raised, and Mia could feel the pressure building with each passing day. Leo had continued to keep her close, involving her in more of the family's operations, from meetings with powerful figures to tracking down information about their rivals. She had seen the darker side of their business, the threats, the secrecy, the constant vigilance. But as much as it terrified her, Mia couldn't turn away. She was learning, adapting, and proving to Leo that he had made the right decision in trusting her. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting, Leo called Mia into his office. She had been working non-stop, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and decisions. But when Leo spoke, his tone was different. There was an urgency to it, a quiet seriousness that made her stop what she was doing and focus. "Mia," Leo said as she stepped into the office, his eyes locking onto hers. "We've got a problem. Something bigger than we've dealt with before." Mia's heart raced. "What kind of problem?" she asked, her voice steady. But her mind was already scrambling to anticipate what might be coming. Leo motioned for her to sit down, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something more intense, more urgent. "There's a threat to everything we've built. Someone from the inside is working against us," he said, his voice grim. "I need you to track them down. You've been watching, observing. You know how this works. I need you to find the leak." Mia's stomach twisted. "Who is it?" she asked, already dreading the answer. Leo's gaze never wavered. "I don't know yet, but I trust you to figure it out. We can't let this go on any longer." Mia sat silently, taking in the gravity of his words. She had seen betrayal tear apart families and alliances, but to think that it could come from within the DeLuca ranks felt like a betrayal in itself. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm, despite the unease that settled deep in her chest. Leo stood, walking over to the window, his back turned to her. "This is bigger than you or me, Mia," he said quietly. "If we don't handle this, it could all come crashing down. And I won't let that happen. Not after everything we've worked for." There was something in his voice that Mia had never heard before, raw vulnerability, the weight of the empire on his shoulders. She realized then just how much Leo had invested in her. She wasn't just a maid or an employee anymore. She was someone he trusted with the very core of his world. "I won't let you down," Mia said, her voice steady and filled with resolve. Leo turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "I know you won't. That's why I chose you." With that, Leo handed her a folder. "Here's everything we've gathered so far. You'll need to move quickly, but quietly. We don't want to alert them to what we're doing." Mia took the folder, her fingers brushing against Leo's as she did. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that fleeting glance, Mia felt the weight of his expectations. She was no longer just a part of his world. She was integral to it. As Mia left Leo's office that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing. The danger was real, and it was closing in. But she couldn't turn back now. She had a mission to complete, a betrayal to uncover. And she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The next few days were a blur of activity. Mia sifted through the information, piecing together fragments of conversations, notes, and accounts that might point to the traitor. The deeper she dug, the more she realized how dangerous the situation had become. The traitor was clever, operating under the radar, leaving barely a trace. But Mia was relentless. She wasn't about to let Leo's empire crumble. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Someone within their organization was playing a very dangerous game. It wasn't long before Mia identified a pattern, a series of meetings and transactions that didn't line up. And then, the pieces started to fall into place. She knew who the traitor was. But confronting them wasn't going to be easy. As the days wore on, Mia felt the pressure mounting. She had found the leak, but the true test was just beginning. Leo had put his trust in her, and she wasn't going to let him down. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had done so far was only a small part of a much bigger plan. The tension in the mansion, in Leo's world, was thickening. Mia could feel it in every conversation, every glance. The endgame was near, and the choices she made now would decide everything. The pressure was mounting. Mia had uncovered the truth, and now, she was walking a dangerous line. She had tracked down the traitor, and everything in her being told her that confronting him was the only way forward. Leo had trusted her, but she had no idea what the consequences of exposing the betrayer would be. She knew that Leo's world wasn't one that allowed for mistakes or weakness. There was no turning back. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat in Leo's office, waiting for him to arrive. The documents she had collected were spread out in front of her, each one a piece of the puzzle that had taken her days to put together. She had found the leak. Michael, one of Leo's closest associates, had been siphoning money from the family business and passing it along to their rivals. The realization had hit her hard, but it had also solidified her resolve. Leo had to know. She couldn't keep this secret. Leo walked in, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. He closed the door behind him and walked over to her. His usual confidence was there, but Mia could see the subtle signs of strain on his face, the lines around his eyes deepening. She could tell something was different. "What have you found?" he asked, his voice calm, but laced with an underlying tension. Mia hesitated, her heart racing. She had never seen Leo like this, never seen him so on edge. She had been a part of this world for a while now, but in this moment, she realized just how dangerous it truly was. "It's Michael," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo's expression didn't change, but Mia could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Tell me everything," he demanded. Mia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she had to say. "He's been siphoning money for months. I found the evidence. He's been sending it to one of our rivals, trying to set up a power shift." Leo's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Mia continued, "I'm sure of it, Leo. He's the one behind this." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Leo stood there, staring at the documents in front of him, processing the information. Mia waited, unsure of what would happen next. She had done her part, but now, she was handing him the final piece of the puzzle. And she knew the consequences could be severe. Finally, Leo spoke, his voice colder than she had ever heard it. "I knew something was off. I've been watching him for a while, but I never thought it would go this far." He paused, his gaze meeting Mia's. "You've done well, Mia. I knew I made the right choice trusting you." The words struck Mia deeper than she expected. She had been living in the shadow of Leo's world for so long. But now, standing in front of him, she felt the weight of his trust like never before. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear running through her veins. Leo's gaze hardened, the fury of betrayal flickering in his eyes. "Now we deal with it." The words hung in the air, and Mia knew this wasn't going to be as simple as confronting Michael. Leo's world didn't work that way. She had seen it before, the cold ruthlessness that followed betrayal. "How?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Leo turned to face her fully, his gaze unwavering. "We eliminate the threat. Michael needs to be taken care of, and anyone else involved needs to be neutralized. But we do it smart. We don't rush in blindly. Mia nodded, her stomach churning. She had known this was coming, but hearing Leo say it aloud made it all too real. This wasn't just business. This was a life-or-death game, and now, she was part of it. We do this together, Leo said, his voice steady but filled with an unspoken promise. Mia felt her pulse quicken. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm, even as doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She wasn't sure what taking care of Michael meant, but she knew one thing. This was the life she had chosen. There was no going back. Leo's expression softened, just for a moment. Good. Let's get it done. The rest of the evening was a blur of preparation. Leo had set up a discreet meeting with the right people, the ones who could make this go smoothly. Mia was to be the one to confront Michael. It wasn't a task she wanted, but it was the role she had to play. As the time drew near, Mia found herself standing at the door to Michael's office. She had already spoken with Leo's people, arranged the necessary details. The trap was set. Michael had no idea what was coming. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The door opened, and there he stood. Michael. He looked surprised to see her, but he quickly masked it with a smile. Mia, he said smoothly, his tone too casual. What's this about? Mia stepped inside, closing the door behind her. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. Michael's smile faded as he closed the distance between them. What is it, Mia? What's this about? Mia didn't hesitate. You've been stealing from Leo, and I have the proof. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Michael just stood there, frozen. Then, his face twisted into a mask of anger and fear. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice shaking. Mia took a step closer, her eyes locked onto his. I know everything, Michael. It's over. You're done. As the truth settled between them, the tension in the room grew unbearable. She knew what would happen next, and she wasn't sure if she was ready. But Leo's words echoed in her mind. We eliminate the threat. And in this world, threats didn't survive. Michael took a step back, fear in his eyes. Mia stood tall, not backing down. This was the moment that would change everything. There was no turning back now. Leo had trusted her, and she wouldn't let him down. As Mia stood in the room, staring at Michael's terrified face, her mind was racing. The silence between them felt suffocating, and she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was the point of no return. Leo had trusted her to handle the situation, and now, everything depended on her actions. Michael, though clearly panicked, tried to maintain his composure, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. He could see the resolve in Mia's eyes, and he knew that his time had come. You don't have to do this, he pleaded, his voice trembling. Leo doesn't need to know. We can work something out. I can make this right. Mia shook her head slowly, her expression unwavering. No, she said softly but firmly. You've already made your choices, Michael. It's too late for second chances. As the words left her lips, she felt a sense of finality. She wasn't just speaking for herself, but for everything Leo had built and everything that was at stake. Michael stepped back, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape, but there was no way out. The trap was set, and he had nowhere to run. Please, he said, his voice desperate now. Leo doesn't have to know. I can fix this. I can make things right. But Mia wasn't listening anymore. She had heard enough. The trust she had in Leo was unwavering, and she would do whatever it took to protect him and the family's legacy. You made your choice when you decided to betray Leo, she said quietly, her voice calm despite the storm raging inside her. And now you'll have to live with the consequences. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Michael's face twisted in a mix of fear and regret, but Mia didn't flinch. She was no longer the maid who cleaned the halls of the mansion, hidden in the shadows. She had become something more, someone who had earned Leo's trust and was willing to fight for it, even if it meant making the hardest choices. Just as Michael opened his mouth to speak again, the door behind them opened, and Leo stepped in. His eyes scanned the room, locking onto Michael with a coldness that sent a shiver down Mia's spine. Leo didn't need to say a word. The air in the room shifted instantly, and Michael knew his fate had been sealed. Leo walked toward him with an air of quiet authority, his gaze never leaving Michael's face. I trusted you, Leo said, his voice low but filled with unmistakable anger. And you chose to betray me. Do you know what happens to people who betray me? Michael swallowed hard, his mouth dry. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Leo continued, his voice colder now. You don't get to decide how this ends. I do. As Leo's words echoed in the room, Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. This was it. The moment she had been dreading had arrived. Michael had betrayed them, and now Leo would do what was necessary to protect his empire. The room was silent as Leo stood over Michael, his gaze unwavering. Mia could see the sharpness in Leo's eyes, the cold calculation that had made him the man he was. He didn't hesitate. Without saying another word, Leo motioned to the two men standing at the door. They stepped forward, and Michael's fate was sealed in that single, chilling moment. As the men escorted Michael out of the room, Mia remained still, her heart pounding in her chest. She had known this would happen, but witnessing it unfold was different than she had imagined. There was no turning back now. Leo turned to Mia, his face softening just slightly. You did well, he said quietly. I knew you could handle it. Mia looked up at him, unsure of what to say. She had done what was asked of her, but the weight of the decision still hung heavy on her heart. Leo's gaze softened, as if sensing her uncertainty. You did what needed to be done. No one who betrays us gets a second chance. Mia nodded, her throat tight. She understood what he was saying, but part of her still struggled with the reality of the situation. This was the world she had chosen to be a part of, but it didn't make the choices any easier. Leo stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've proven yourself, Mia. You're not just a part of this family. You're vital to it. And you need to understand that. Mia swallowed, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside her. I understand, she said quietly, her voice firm despite the conflict swirling inside her. Leo's eyes softened, and he nodded. Good. We're stronger because of you. As he turned to leave the room, Mia stayed behind for a moment, her mind racing. This was it. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The choices she had made had led her here, and now she was part of a world that would require more from her than she ever thought possible. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a part of Leo's empire, and that meant she had to be ready for whatever came next. Mia stood therein, the silence of the room, her heart still pounding, but now with a sense of purpose. The world she had entered was one of power, loyalty, and betrayal. She had learned what it meant to truly be a part of it, and now she was ready for whatever came next. The storm outside had finally passed, but Mia knew that the real storm was just beginning. In this captivating tale of power, betrayal, and trust, Mia navigates a world filled with danger, loyalty, and dark secrets. As she becomes entangled in a relationship with Leo DeLuca, a Mafia boss, she must confront the harsh realities of the underworld, where every decision can have deadly consequences. As Mia rises through the ranks, her loyalty is tested, and she is forced to make choices that blur the lines between right and wrong. This dark romance takes the reader on an emotional roller coaster, exploring the complexity of trust and betrayal in a world where survival is a constant battle. With every twist and turn, Mia finds herself deeper in Leo's dangerous world, where nothing is as it seems, and love comes at a high cost. The intense connection between Mia and Leo keeps the reader hooked, as their bond deepens amidst the chaos and danger that surrounds them. With the stakes higher than ever, Mia must decide whether to embrace this dark romance fully or escape before it consumes her. A thrilling narrative, this story captures the essence of dark romance, where love, loyalty, and power collide in a high-stakes game. As Mia's journey unfolds, she discovers that trust is the most dangerous weapon of all in a world dominated by power and deception. Explore the depths of this dark romance and immerse yourself in a tale that will leave you questioning everything.